I am so excited and feel very honored and blessed for my very first guest in the Mindset Matters podcast today. My guest is the wonderful Brian Proctor, son of the legendary Bob Proctor, the world's most experienced leader and renowned teacher on prosperity, human potential, and personal growth. So, welcome, Brian. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm really, really happy to be here with you.
Thank you very much. Earlier this year, when I first learned about your book, My Father Knew the Secret, coming out, I was really excited because I knew it was going to be a wonderful way to continue Bob's teachings and share his legacy with the world and share what a wonderful human being Bob Proctor was. I've read it multiple times. I think I mentioned that before. And I've just finished listening to the audiobook again. And for someone who has studied with Bob Proctor for several years and who has met him personally, it's just a very special gift that you shared with the world, and to hear the stories about your father directly from you, Brian. So when I shared the news with my community, of course, I got a few questions, as I already mentioned to you, when the book was going to be translated into German. So I was thrilled when you reached out to me to let me know and share the news that the book can now be pre-ordered in German and will be available in German in the beginning of the new year. We will talk some more about Bob's mission to share his material across the world, and maybe you could start for now with sharing a bit about the background of the book, how it was triggered and how it came about, because I'm sure that's something the audience will love to hear.
Well, yeah, you know what, Barbara? I started writing the book a little over 4 years ago.
Mm.
So it's been a while in the making. My father was
Mm.
alive when I started writing it. Um, Before I started to write it, I was actually having a conversation with my wife, Corey, who you know, and I said to Corey, I said, I really feel like taking some of this information and writing a book
Mm.
from my own point of view. But I said I wasn't quite sure how to frame it. And Corey kind of looked at me like I almost had two heads. And she says, Brian, she says, look at every seminar you're at, every event that you're at. What's the number one question you're asked? What's it like to have Bob Proctor as a father? What's it like to be his son?
Mm.
And so it really made sense. So I thought, you know what, that's it. I can write about Bob Proctor as a father, who he was, not just the man on the stage, but what he was like as a father, what he was like growing up with. And so it was kind of fun. I got to, write stories, and I really tried to do it in a conversational tone, to let the reader kind of see from my eyes who Bob Proctor was, how he was to his son, to his own child, and what he taught me. And when I started to write it, I let Dad know that I was writing this book. And
Mm.
he actually really liked the idea. We had a lot of fun conversations around it. Um, the two of us would often be on the phone at 5 a.m. with each other, and I would be sharing certain passages that I was writing about, and I would ask him questions about some of the past, and he would fill me in on some of the stories and give me his perspective on a few things, and it really was a fun experience for the two of us,
Mm.
as we were going through that. I was not finished the book when he passed away,
Mm.
and I certainly uh, didn't. I thought he was going to be here when this book was finished, and unfortunately, that didn't happen. Um, I didn't even have the title of the book before he passed away. We had talked about different titles, and nothing felt really quite right. And
Mm.
the funny thing was, he always said to me, he says, Brian, just take your time with it. Take your time. The right title will come to you, and you'll know it when it comes. And if I can share this kind of a kooky story, it came to me in the middle of the night. It was after he had passed away, and I was having a vivid dream of my father. And I woke up 3 a.m. and that title was in my head. My father knew the secret. And it just
Wow.
it just felt so perfect. And that was it. I just knew that was the title. For those of you watching or listening that have followed my father, he was really a pioneer in the personal development industry. And what most people don't know is he didn't really make it big in this industry until the movie The Secret came out.
Mm.
And that's why this title felt so appropriate. He was 72 years old when that movie came out. And that's what really propelled him to the large stage and really got, the name Bob Proctor known in the world in a much bigger way. So it felt fitting. So that's kind of the story of the
Mm.
book, and that's how it all came to be.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And you just mentioned that he was 72 when he got really a household, it got to be a household name. And when the movie The Secret came out, I love the story that you also shared in the book about how the secret came to him.
Yes.
And that is also quite an unusual story, right? But maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I think The Secret is really something that a lot of people have seen, have heard, have read the book. So that's how most of the people that I meet have come across Bob Proctor at some point.
Well, it's a really interesting story. The whole movie, The Secret, and the book is really based around the law of attraction
Mm.
and what we think about, what we envision, we bring into our life. And Dad was always, it's important to have that vision, to have that dream of what we're going for, but we also have to step out and take action. And he was always doing things. He was always doing whatever it took to get his message out in the world.
Mm.
And how The Secret came to be was really interesting. He had a phone message on his cell phone that he couldn't quite understand. It was somebody from Australia, um, and he was busy. He was running through an airport to, I guess, go and do another seminar somewhere. And he asked Gina, his assistant, could she clear his phone off, check the messages, and get back to him about it? And she did. And it was a message from Rhonda Byrne's sister, I guess, who was part of the crew that was making this film. And they wanted Dad to be in the movie, and they'd been trying to reach him for a few months, and they were unsuccessful in reaching him. And they were filming literally that following weekend in Aspen, Colorado. Well, the amazing thing is my father was going to be in Aspen, Colorado that
Wow.
very weekend doing a seminar. And the interesting thing is he'd only ever been in Aspen, Colorado one other time. So it's not like was a regular stop for him. And the event he was doing was literally in a hotel across the street from where this film was, where they were filming. So, he said he'd be happy to do it. And all he had to do was walk across the street, sit in a chair. He basically was interviewed and talked to for about an hour and left. The amazing thing about this, Barbara, is that he was never paid to be in the movie.
Mm.
And we talk about the law of attraction. I mean, he attracted that into his life. He just
Mhm.
knew that if he kept putting good out there and kept doing whatever he could to get the message out there, his break was going to come, that something was going to happen for him. Little did he know that that was it.
Mm.
And, when that movie came out, it became a phenomenon around the world. And that's what got him on to Larry King Live, Ellen DeGeneres, all these different shows that really propelled him to a whole new world. And you want to talk about the law of attraction. That's it right there. He had the vision that he was going to
Mm.
be seen around the world. He didn't know how it was going to happen, but he just kept taking the steps and kept doing whatever it took to make that
Mm.
happen. And there it was. So it was kind of a cool story.
It's amazing. It's an amazing. I love this story, and all the other ones that you share in the book as well. But this one is, I feel, is very special because it really um, closes the loop, I guess, or closed the loop for him
Hmm.
in his teachings in all these years that he had already gone out and talked about this material and shared it with people. And it also opened up another big realm for him. It opened up the world for him. One story that also I particularly loved is, or one part of the story that I particularly loved is, I think you said it in the book that he knew that he had been waiting for this all his life, right?
Yeah, well, that it was shared in the book, and it was actually a message
Mhm.
from Gina, who was
Oh,
his
that's right.
assistant.
Yeah.
And Gina was with him when he was going to be on Larry King Live. And
Mm,
she was in the car with him as they were driving to the studio. And Gina, who is a dear friend, I mean, she's like a sister
mm,
to me. Um, she said to Dad, she says, "Bob, are you nervous about being on Larry King Live and meeting him?" And it was funny. His response was, "No, I'm not nervous at all. I have been waiting my entire
mm,
life for this. I have prepared for this." And that's how he looked at it. He was prepared for it. So when it
mm,
happened, it was just a natural conclusion to the work that he had done before that time. So
mm.
that's really neat.
It talks about his belief in what he was doing, in his belief in his goal, right? And that was a big part of what I first learned from Bob was that you need the belief in your goal.
Yeah, you know what, Barbara? That's the big key.
Mm,
And that's what The Secret talked about, this
mm,
belief in what you're going for. And what happens with most people is they wish for a thing,
mm,
think, "Oh, this is never going to happen to me.
mm,
I'm not going to get this." And that thinking, that's what you're bringing into your
mm,
life. And he always said, if you need to hold the vision of what you
mm,
really want in your life, and then step out and take action, even if it's imperfect action, but start doing something to get yourself there, and always have that inner knowing that you're
mm,
going to get there. And if you do, it will happen. It really will. Rather than wishing for a thing, you need to
mm.
know that this thing is going to come your way.
Yeah, and he definitely did. He did that for so many years and continued to know that his message was going to reach more and more people, I guess until the very end, right?
Yeah,
I remember, I remember, I don't know when it first was that I heard Bob talk about his big goal to be in every country around the world, right?
yeah,
And and he achieved that in one of the last seminars that he gave, one of the last live broadcasts, right? It was I think it was a couple of years prior to his passing when he learned that that is exactly what had happened live, right?
yeah. Well, and here's the interesting thing, Barbara. When he set that goal, it was in
Mm.
1973. Think about it.
Wow.
So you want to
Wow.
talk about commitment to
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
It was in 1973, and that happened, I don't know, probably around 2020, 2019,
Mm.
somewhere in there. So you want to talk about a commitment to an idea, to a worthy ideal.
Mm.
Um, that's it. And he really lived what he talked. He
Mm.
just
Speaking of living what he talked and what he taught, um, I mean, it's hard for me to pinpoint any favorite chapter of the book or any favorite topic that you touch because there's so many. But one that I just thought of today when I was reflecting on the book was you talk about acting as if.
Mhm.
And one sentence that got engraved in my mind after hearing it from Bob so many times was, "What others think of you is none of your business." And you start this chapter then with stating that freedom comes when we stop being what other people think we should be and start acting like the person we want to be. I love that. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about that and what that also meant for your father and for you now, that you learned this from him.
Yeah, well, he really believed that you need to be the person you want to become. And you just need to act as if you are that person. And if you do, you will become that person.
Mm,
And, he lived that. I mean, as I say, he set that goal in 1973. And from that point forward, he acted like he was known around the world. It
mm,
took a while, but he always acted as if he was that person. And he taught that to me right from when I was a young child. And you know, I, I often wonder, did he realize what he was even doing for himself? Because
mm,
he just lived from that place. And even when things weren't happening around him, he still acted like he was that person. And he just knew that that was going to come to be. And I mean, I look back to an example of myself. I was in my mid 20s. I got into the real estate business. I became a real estate agent in the city of Toronto, and I was 26 years old. And I had all kinds of friends and everybody, saying to me, Brian, who do you think you are that you're going to be this
Mm.
great real estate agent at 26? Who's going to take you seriously? And my father, who was always such a great support, I can remember specifically him talking with me and said, Brian, you need to act as if you are the most
Mm.
successful real estate agent in the entire city of Toronto. You just act like that. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks. Don't worry about what they say. You be that person and you will become that. And there's so much truth in that. My very first clients, they would have never known they were my first clients because I acted like I was the best agent in the city of
Mm.
Toronto. And I treated them like they were gold. And because of that, I started doing a lot of deals. My first year in the business, I actually made it into the top 100 of a very large real estate firm internationally, which was kind of interesting at that
Mm.
age. But it is
Yeah.
because I acted like I was that person. And there's just so much power in that. So I challenge anybody that's watching this, stop worrying about what other people think of
Mm.
you, because quite frankly, they're not thinking that much. And when they do, does it really matter? It's really, Dad always said, it's none of our business what anybody else
Mm.
thinks of us. And start being the person you truly want to become. You can be that person right now. It's a decision. And once you do, the world will start to open up to you in all kinds of ways because you are being the person you truly want to be. We're all capable of being so much more. So it's just opening up the mind and allowing ourselves to be.
Mm. Absolutely. Opening up the mind is a good way of leading over to the next topic that I did want to talk to you about, because another story you share in the book, and I've heard you talk about this on stage as well, is how your father taught, or rather not taught you this material,
Hmm.
and how you then had a chance to pass it on to the next generation of proctors. I can relate to this so much because I'm now seeing what my working with this material does for my daughter who just turned 13.
Hmm.
Could you share a little bit about that?
Are you talking about the night prayers?
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
love this.
So it's kind of a cool story. I think my earliest memories of my father are when he tucked me into bed at night. He was on the road a fair bit in the early days, but whenever he was home, he was the one that tucked me into bed.
Mhm.
And I can still remember this as clear as a bell. I go back and I can feel it.
Mhm.
He would sit on the edge of the bed and he'd put his hand on my chest. He always said it's really important to have that physical connection. And he would start to talk about my day, and he would start to talk about all of the good things I did that day. And if something bad happened, he would have me look for the good in it, which was
Mhm.
really, I think, a great quality. And so he would have me, even if something bad, he would have me focus on the good around it, the lesson I learned from it. And then he would end it with this. He would say, Brian, you are capable of being, doing, or having
Mhm.
anything you want in this world. He says, you're going to have a great sleep tonight. When you wake up in the morning, you'll have a big smile on your face and you're going to have a wonderful day. And that's,
Mhm.
that's what he did. And it, for me, I know that shaped who I am. It
Mhm.
became that he helped build my self-image. And the joy of that was that I got to do that then with my kids when they were
Mhm.
growing up. And because I did that, when my kids went through teenage years, I had no issues. There was never any
Mhm.
trouble. They're just
Mhm.
they're just great, well-adjusted, well, adults now.
Mhm.
And the best part is I now have a couple of grandchildren. And I see my daughter doing this with her children.
Oh, that's
So,
wonderful.
dad changed generations by
Yeah.
this one act of kindness at a
Yeah.
simple bedtime routine. It was a great thing.
Well, it seems like such a simple bedtime routine, and at the same time, isn't it opening up the mind of a child to this, and showing them what is possible for them, and that they can do, have, and be anything they set their mind to, is giving them a chance to live a completely different life from if they had not learned that.
Right.
So this is really a wonderful, wonderful part of the material that Bob taught when it comes to children. What I also loved so much about his teachings, and I find it in your book again, is also the way you wrote it is very approachable, is
Mhm.
very easy to read. And that's what I also always felt with Bob when he taught. He was not using very complicated, complex vocabulary or very difficult theories. It was always very easy to understand, easy for people to grasp. Did he intentionally craft it this way?
He did. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he always said, and I can remember him saying it from the stage. I can remember him saying it
Mm-hmm.
in private at home. He said, you know, a person never understands a concept or a
Mm-hmm.
thing fully until they can explain it
Yeah,
to a child and have the
yeah.
child understand it. And that's really what he was about. So he always spoke in a simple way that everybody
Mm-hmm.
could understand and use the material. And so when I was writing the book, for me, that was always kind of in the back of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided, you know, for me, what felt right was to write it in a real conversational tone,
Mm-hmm.
as if I was just talking to a good friend. I just think that way it allowed the concepts of everything that my father taught me, all the stories, all the experiences, so that it would be easy to read. And then my wife had a wonderful idea. She said to me, she says, Brian, when I was writing some of the stories, Corey edited the book for me, and she
Mm-hmm.
said, you know, some of these stories, you should leave them the story, not try to push the lesson in it. Pull the lesson
Mm-hmm.
out and put that at the end of the chapter. And I thought, boy, that's a great idea. So we
Oh.
reorganized it a little bit so that I was basically just telling an experience or a story. And then at the end of the chapter, we had these consider points. And that
Mm-hmm.
is how to apply that message to your own life so that
Mm-hmm.
you can change the way you're living. So that's kind of how it came about. And it's really because of my father. It's a way to, I was able to, in a book, really in a simple way, have a conversation with the reader and let them know
Mm-hmm.
what it was like to have Bob Proctor as a father, what he taught me, how I applied it in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and how you can too.
Oh, I love the consider points because they do exactly what you just talked about. They help you reflect what you just read or what you just listened to within your own experience, within your own life, and see how you can apply it. Because that is what makes the difference, right? I mean, in the end, it's not just listening to a story, it's not just hearing the material or, you know, being aware of the theory, it's applying it, it's knowing how you can use it to advance your own life, to become more aware and to grow. And that is what these consider points do for people if they really take the time to to read it and to reflect.
Yeah, and that I mean that was something that, Dad always taught me. He says,
Mhm.
there's so many people that study the material, but they never actually apply it or do anything with
Mhm.
it. And he said, there's no good in that. What's the point of that? He said, the
Mhm.
people that really get on in the world, they study it, but then they step out and they take action. They
Mhm.
do something with it. Um, and that's really. I mean, you're a great example of that, Barbara. What you've been doing over the I don't know how many years you've been doing this, but you've been doing it for quite a while, and
Mhm.
you study it, but you step out and take action and you do things. This very podcast is a great example of
Mhm.
that. It's something that you just knew you wanted to do, and you stepped out and you took action and started to do it.
Yes, and I mean, to be honest, yeah, I've been thinking about this podcast for a long time, and that's what sometimes happens.
Mhm.
You procrastinate, you push things out, and then things are not going to change unless you change something, and you have to take action and actually do it. And I learned so much from working with Bob's material, from learning from him, that I knew exactly what was going on inside of me while I was procrastinating. And now obviously we're sitting here and we're talking, and I'm happy to have launched this podcast and have it out. So it's always a matter of continuing to grow, continuing to become better. I remember Bob saying so many times, better is a good word,
Yeah.
because you can't always get better, right? You can always grow no matter where you are in life, no matter how good you already are or how successful you already are. That's what I also understood from him. We can always continue to grow. And he was, I guess, the best example. I just mentioned it to a client today, in a conversation we had. I said, personal development, that's what I learned from Bob, has no finish line. And he was the best example for it. He studied for over 60 years. And, if you would think there is one person in the world that knows this book that he studied, it would have been Bob Proctor, right? And he continued to read it, and he never finished studying, Think and Grow Rich, and he never finished studying all the other material that he was working with. So he was a lifelong student, and he wanted to be this until the very end, right?
Yeah, you know what, Barbara? Here was you really hit it on the head there.
Mm.
He never felt that he knew it all.
Mm.
He never acted that way. He was always learning and he was always studying. And quite frankly, he studied right up until like probably 2 days before he passed
Wow.
away. And the only reason why he didn't maybe the day before was because he wasn't overly conscious.
Mm. Mm.
He studied every day. That book, Think and Grow Rich, that was given to him in October of 1961.
Wow.
I was born in December of 1961, so I was kind of there for the whole ride, and it was really interesting. I was in Toronto I was there just about a month ago, and I was doing something online, and I said to Linda, his wife, I said, Linda, can I get Dad's Think and Grow Rich book? I
Mm.
want to use it for something. She said sure, and so she got it for me, and just touching that book was,
Mm.
I could feel my father. But here's the message that I really want to put out there. This book was held together with this big rubber band, and I would take this rubber band off. If I was to open it up, it was falling apart. And he had so many people wanted to buy him a new book or get that book rebound. He'd have nothing to do with it. For him, this was a cherished friend that was there his entire journey. But the lesson in this book that was falling apart was that you don't find a book get to that point
Mm.
unless you've been reading and reading and reading it. He
Mm.
studied it every single day. He never felt he knew it all. And that
Mm.
was, boy, that's a magical quality. And
Mhm.
I think that's why so many people wanted to learn from him because he was always studying, he was always learning. It's important.
It is. It is. I mean, our logical mind and what we learn in school, and how most of us are brought up. We read a book once, and then we know the book, and we try to impress something into our mind. We remember it, and then we know it. But that's not how it is, and that's not how Bob Proctor was studying, and how he was actually also teaching people, right?
Yeah, I mean, Dad would take a book, Barbara, and he had a book stand on his
Mm.
desk, and he would set the book in the book stand, opened up, and he would read those same 2 pages, sometimes for a week, sometimes for a month. He would
Wow.
just keep reading those pages. And what he was doing was really getting a true understanding of the words that were written there.
Mm.
And, he always said that when you read something and you come back to it and read it again, you're reading it from a different perspective
Mhm.
a different person. We're always changing. And that's the one thing he found with good books like that. He says every time you read it, you're reading it from a different perspective,
Mhm.
a different person. So you're going to see something different in it.
Mhm.
And that's what he was all about. He studied to the point of just such a deep knowledge. It was inspiring.
It absolutely was. It absolutely was. And for me, personally, it completely changed how I'm reading books now.
Mhm.
And I've I've read many books many times now, and I always have a text marker with me, and I always take notes. I've never done this before, to be honest. I've even non-fictional books. I just read them and thought, okay, now I'm done with it, and that's just not how it is.
Right.
There's so much more in it every single time you go through it again, and yeah, it's invaluable
Yeah.
having learned that. One other thing that you talk about in the book, and that's also something that I thought I had known before I started working with Bob. And then I realized I had no idea what it really meant was gratitude, the
Hmm.
power of gratitude. Because when you talk to people, everybody would say probably, yeah, I'm grateful. I'm, of course, yeah, I'm grateful for my life, etc. But that's not really going into the same depth as Bob Proctor took gratitude and how he taught it, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was such a believer in the
Mm.
practice of gratitude and to look for the good that is around you.
Mm.
He said, I heard a thing, I don't know, it was probably a couple of months ago. It said, none of us are immune to adversity.
Mm.
Things will happen. But Dad was always of the viewpoint that if we look for the good around us, we will bring more good into our life, even when bad things
Mm.
are happening. And I think it goes back to the morning prayers. When if I had something bad happening that day, he would have me look for the good in it. He would have me look for what
Mm.
am I grateful for about this. And he said it's so important that every morning, and this is something he did for years, he would write out what he was grateful for. He would
Mm.
start his day that way. And I know a lot of people talk about it, but here's the point of it. The point of it is that it puts you in a frame of mind that you
Mm.
start to look for what are
Mm.
you grateful for? What is good around you? And it opens you up to more good. One of the best examples I can give you is watching Dad at the end of his life. I was fortunate. I got to spend close to the last 6 months of his life. I pretty much lived in Toronto. I was up at the house with helping Dad and Linda. Um, and so I just got to spend a lot of time with Dad. And you want to talk about how powerful gratitude was. I can remember Dad after doing a session online. He was in a lot of pain, was really not feeling well. I'd get him back to the house. He would lay on the couch and he would just drift off to sleep. And I'd be sitting
Mm.
there, and then he'd kind of wake up, and here he was, really not doing well. I mean, this one situation I think was probably a week or two before he passed away. I mean, it was not long, and he laid there and he was looking up at the ceiling, and he even said to me, he says, "Bri," he says, "look at the ceiling. Isn't this beautiful? What a
Mm.
what a beautiful life we have. What a great way of living that we have." And even when he was at his worst, he was looking for the good around him.
Mm.
Boy, there's power in that. There really is. And I challenge anybody watching this or listening to this that if you've got bad things happening, that's just a part of life. But look for the good in it. Sometimes we got to really dig for it, but look for the good around us and give that energy. And the negative stuff will diminish. It's not going to eliminate it right away, but it will diminish. It will soften the edges of hard things and really start to focus on what good you do have going on. Because
Mm.
when you can do that, you will bring more of that into your life. That's how Dad lived. He lived it right up until the day he died.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. And since you just mentioned this, look for the good in it, that reminds me of this thing here that I got from Bob at one of the Matrix events. And you also mentioned it in the book, right? That has these three key sentences on it that I love so much. I've taken a photograph with all three sides of it, and I'm sending it to people again and again when I know it will help them. Um, this is such a powerful message, and as I said, I got it at a Matrix seminar. It was the first live seminar where I studied with Bob several years ago. But yeah, could you talk a little bit about this?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably have one there too, right?
I've got one right here as well. So
There we go.
here's the interesting thing. He got this from Michael Beckwith, who is a good friend
Mm.
of his.
Mhm.
Michael is the minister at Agape Church in
Mm.
California. And Michael said, whenever anything bad happens to us, we need to look at it from 3 points of view. And this is what it says here.
Mm.
It says, it is what it is. Accept it.
Yeah.
It will
Mhm.
either control you or you will control it. And then he would say, harvest the good. There is good in everything. Seek
Mm.
and you will find. And number three, forgive the rest. Forgive means to let go of completely, abandon, and to
Mm.
release. And
So
God,
powerful.
Yeah, I think back to dad, and I think of so many conversations we had. And if something bad was happening or somebody was doing something that wasn't right, um, dad never looked at the worst of it. It was really
Mm,
interesting. I can remember him saying so clearly, this was one of his key phrases: "It is what it is." And then
mm.
he would look for the good, and he would just carry on. And he lived that. I think that's why he had Gina get these made and give them out at events, because there's such an important message in that. We need to just let go of the nonsense. Bad things happen. It is what it is. Harvest the good and forget the rest.
This is so powerful,
Yeah.
so powerful. One more thing that if I may, I wanted to ask you on, because we're at this time of the year when a lot of people start to set goals for the new year.
Yep.
Some people build vision boards or at least write down their goals for the new year. And you also have a chapter in the book where you talk about vision and vision boards and the power of a vision board.
Mhm.
You have your own story in there. You have a story of your stepson in there. If you could talk about this a little bit, I guess that would definitely shed some light on the power of a vision.
Yeah. So dad was, let's face it, he was really big on goals.
Mm,
And that was one of the primary things he taught. I remember as a young boy, even, I loved his goal achieving
mm,
seminars. And
mm.
and he was always of the opinion that you need to have a goal that's so big, you don't have a clue how you're going to get there,
Yeah.
but you'll step out and do things you would never have normally done because you're so inspired to get there. So, this time of year especially, he would say, you want to set a goal that is big, that is bigger than you are, that inspires you, that causes you to get out of bed in the morning and do things in a day you wouldn't normally have done.
Mm,
Um, and part of that could be around, creating vision boards, doing things that will keep that goal at the forefront of your mind. um, I have a vision board that I created,
mhm,
that has certainly my number one goal, my big goal that I'm working towards, but then all kinds of other periphery goals, little things that I'd like to accomplish. And I actually had fun with it. I felt like a kid putting it together,
mm,
just finding pictures that resonated with me, that felt good. And I would put them on this board, and then I had it framed so that it looked like a professional piece of art. I used to
mhm,
have it in the bedroom. I'd see it every day when I'd go to bed, and I'd see it as soon as I woke up. I'm spending so much time in my office right now that I moved it, and it's right across from me, right across from my desk. So I am looking at it all the time.
mm,
And the power of that is just to keep you on track. Having a vision board,
mm,
having a goal card, having something that you're going after that you can keep at the forefront of your mind will keep you committed and will cause you to do things at the times that you could be taken off track. And that's really it in its simple form. It's to keep you focused on the big dream. He always
mm,
said that we need to have a goal that inspires us, that we don't know how we're going to get there. And he said, when we get there, achieving that goal, that's kind of like the candy on the cake, or
mhm,
the cherry on the cake. It's great to get there, but he says the real experience is in the growth along the way and what you learn by getting there. And boy, I think, Barbara, all the big things I've achieved in my life, getting them, yes, it was great.
mhm,
It was kind of anticlimactic when it actually happened. When I look back on it, it's the growth that I experienced
mm,
getting there. And, I've got big goals around this book. I want this book out in the world in a big way because I know it can help people. I put all the best things that my father taught me in this book. And I don't have a clue how I'm going to get there. I have a big goal for it. I don't know how I'm going to do it.
mm,
Um, but it inspires me. And I'm willing to step out and do things that, quite frankly, I never would have dreamed I would be doing. But I'm doing it because I am committed to the vision that I have of where I want it to be. And you want to start doing something different in your life, have
mhm,
a big goal. Dad always said, pretend you have a magic wand. And if you could pick anything, what would that be? And really
mm,
think about it. What would that be? And this time of year, especially, start to think, what would I really like my life to be like? What would I really like to do? What would I like to have? How would I like to be? And start being that person and start living towards that. But most importantly, step out and take action. Do something every day that's going to get you one step closer.
Mm.
It may be a small thing. Everybody's always thinking that big thing that will get me there. You know, it's the little things that add up that make all the difference in the world. Dad taught me that. I look at him with his dream to be all around the world.
Mm.
I mean, that took 50 some years. It wasn't an overnight thing for him, but every day he did something that would get him closer every day. And
Mm.
if you're willing to bet on yourself and step out of your comfort zone, do some of the hard things, just take action and do something small every day that's going to get you a little bit closer to your goal. Before you know it, you're there. And boy, oh boy, the ride it's an experience.
I love this. I love this. What a great way to wrap this up, Brian. Thank you so much for inspiring people, especially with this message now, because I what I'm hearing now while you're saying this is your dad saying the fun is in finding out how to get there. And that's what we all want to experience, the fun in finding out how to get to our big goal, right?
It really is. And you know what? It's a fun ride. I mean, Dad always said to me, he says, I am so grateful for my life and I'm grateful
Mm.
for everything that's happened. And he enjoyed the ride.
Mm.
And, I appreciate you having me on. I love sharing this message about my father. I love sharing who he was. This book, I told you before we started the interview, this book was a healing thing for me as well.
Mm.
I really think it speaks to who Bob Proctor was, how he lived, why he lived that way. But more importantly, it really shares how you can take
Mm.
what he did, how he was, so that you can improve your life too, that's everything, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this book, I still have the English copy here because the German one is not printed yet. But um, this book, I feel, from my perspective, it's part a memoir. It's part a book full of wonderful personal stories. Part an easy to read guidebook for
Mhm.
fulfillment, happiness, personal growth, and a goal achievement. And it includes some really beautiful, funny, and touching photographs of your personal albums as well. And it really reflects who Bob Proctor was. So I can recommend it to anyone who has come across him or who has not come across him yet. I recommend to read it and study it as we talked about, and really experience the lessons that you talk about in the book. And I'll put in the show notes where to get this copy or the German copy. As I said, you can pre-order it now. I'm so excited to get my hands on it as well. So I'm going to read the German one again once I have this here. But I highly recommend to everybody who's listening now or who's listening to the podcast at a later point to get their hands on this book and really experience it for themselves. Thank you so much, Brian, for being with me today, for taking the time for this interview. All the best for your big goal for this book. Keep us posted. And I hope you come back one day and talk about the progress and the next steps that lay ahead for you with the book and with this beautiful journey.
I'd be happy to. Thank you very much, Barbara.
Thank you, Brian.